Obviously, since we last held one of these open fora to discuss this set of issues, events have moved on a bit, and Article 50 has obviously been invoked, and our government has started to shape up the negotiations with the European Union for our exit from the EU. I think you all know my own particular personal view about that. I still feel that we shouldn't be leaving the EU, but we are. And so it's very important that we do the best for you, our staff and students, and that we continue to make an emphasis about the things that we consider to be particularly important. I did want to start by stating the blindingly obvious, and that is that we are very proud and very pleased to have a lot of EU citizens here as members of staff and as members of our student body. You add a great deal to this university. You're an integral part of who we are, the way we see ourselves, and we want to do our very best for you. We want you to feel valued. We want you to feel supported as this particular political wind blows over us, over higher education here in the UK. I think the most important thing for me today is to do plenty of listening to you and to see how you're feeling and to answer your questions and where we can to try and address your concerns within the constraints that we also are facing politically. What are we doing as an organisation at the moment about this situation? And I think I want to tell you about three things: what we're doing politically, what we're doing in terms of you and your support, and then I also want to mention a group called the Brexit and Beyond group, which is an academic group who've asked me to say a few things about what they're up to. That's a group of academics in this institution with a lot of EU and or government expertise. So the first thing I want to say is about our political input. We have had ministerial visits here to UCL. We've also hosted a select committee which I gave evidence. We're working through the Russell Group and through Universities UK to put pressure on the government about things that matter to us. We are having a positive effect. So the most recent announcement that was positive was that our government indicating that students for 18-19 entry will continue to pay the home fee and will continue to receive the access to the loan book for the duration of their course. And I would anticipate, by the way, that the same will happen for 19-20, because as far as I can see, it has to, by the fact that we will still at that stage be a member of the EU. We won't formally have withdrawn, and therefore we're covered by the treaty. So the student side of things and prospective student side of things is looking a bit better just over the last, I think that announcement was made about a week ago when I was away actually. So that's a good thing. The next, probably the single most important thing from my perspective is your rights as EU citizens here in the UK and your right to continue to remain and the other rights that you have in terms of healthcare, social care, pensions, etc. And this is something that our government has indicated that it would like to settle as quickly as possible. But that's not meeting response so far from the European Union, who are still holding to the mantra that nothing will be agreed until everything is agreed. My personal view about that is it's complete nonsense, that if politicians wanted to settle the rights of EU citizens in the UK, they could do so now, and in return, of course, we would expect the rights of UK citizens in other European countries to be part of that discussion. But a negotiation is a negotiation, and you've seen just this week the sort of temperature of the beginning of those negotiations, which seems to be set quite high, with the European Union insisting that we pay somewhere between 60 billion and 100 billion euros as our exit ticket, and they want to know that we're going to pay that bill before they'll do anything else, is the way I've read the newspapers. I think that's appalling. I think politicians are here for people, and I think they should grow up, get real, and sort out this key issue as urgently as possible, and that's what we're saying to them. Now, I have no idea if we can be successful about that. I see very little reason why not, but obviously the political will has to be there on both sides. And then the final thing I wanted to say about what we're doing is, I think I've slowly but surely formed the view that when it comes to the European Union and research, that the best thing for this country to do by a very long way is to cook a deal with the European Union about continued access to Framework 9, Horizon 2020, of course, the next framework, Framework 9, and to the European Research Council. We could do things back in the UK, but it's my personal view that it would not be as good, and particularly in terms of international networking, as cooking a deal with Europe. And of course, we are redoubling our contacts. I'm sure Nicola will talk about this. We're redoubling our contacts and our efforts with our European partner organisations. What's the phrase? We might be leaving the EU, but we're certainly not leaving Europe as an institution. On the HR side, we've got our new director, Fiona, so baptism of fire for Fiona. She's been in the job about 8 or 9 days, and straight in front of everyone to explain what HR are going to do to support you, and I'll not steal her thunder. And then the Brexit and Beyond group, I just wanted to say that this group has formed with my full knowledge and an absolute blessing. What we've done is pulled together, or what they've done is pulled together experts from Europe across the institution. The whole setup is being chaired by Professor Graham Reed, and Graham is a professor in the Office of the Vice-Provost Research, and the group's been established to identify opportunities for UCL research to engage with policy and other external partners and stakeholders in terms of bringing our knowledge and expertise to respond to the policy challenges emerging from Brexit. And what that group are essentially saying is sticking a hand up, indicating that they exist, and asking if there's anyone else that feels that they can contribute to that group or would like to know more about what the group is up to please get in contact. We can post this on a website later, but the best person to contact is Catherine Welch, who's head of UCL Public Policy, k.welch, W-E-L-C-H, @ucl.ac.uk. So we'll put that on the website afterwards so that you've got that address. But that's another activity that I know our government are interacting with when they've got significant questions. And the final thing I just wanted to announce is that I have been asked to chair the Europe group of the Russell Group, taking over from the professor, from the Vice-Chancellor, of Cambridge, Professor Leszek Borisevich, who's done a spectacular job of putting forward the Russell Group's views to Europe, and I consider it a great honour to have been asked to replace him and to be involved. I personally am going to Brussels with the Russell Group at the end of this month for a day of discussions with people who are involved in the negotiations from the European Union side, but also with our politicians and our officials in Brussels. So that will be a golden opportunity to make a lot of the points that I've just made here. And I can promise you that I will not be hanging back. So I'm going to stop there and hand back to Collette, who's going to take us through the rest of the morning. Thank you.
Thank you. So now we're going to hand over to the panellists. I think I'm next. Yes. Thank you. So we're going to hand over to the panel now and invite them to say a few words. And if we go, first of all, to Dame Nicola.
Thank you very much, Collette.
I've been Vice-Provost International at UCL now for 3 years, after a career largely spent in the Foreign Office, and about a third of that career was working either in or on the EU. Picking up what the Provost said a moment ago about the mantra, nothing is agreed until everything is agreed. It's really common in multilateral negotiations. And the benign interpretation of it is you're trying to prevent people being reluctant to do trade-offs. But also there's another mantra in multilateral negotiations which talks about early harvests, which means what can we all agree on early on. And that's why I think it's well worth us continuing to press the British government to seek agreement on the right to remain of EU citizens in the UK and British citizens in other EU countries. Michael mentioned the Brexit and Beyond group, which focuses on the policy contribution UCL can make. We also have a Brexit mitigation group, which I work on with Michael, which looks at the internal implications of Brexit on this university, focusing on things like student recruitment, staff recruitment and retention, and so on. Going back to last June's referendum, and my reaction to it in personal terms was exactly as Michael's. It was unexpected and to me, entirely undesirable, but we are where we are. One of the things we started to do pretty quickly was to look at what the implications of Brexit were for our global engagement strategy. And we did a very hasty look at it and decided that our immediate reaction had to be that we needed to redouble our international engagement. And then we did a slightly slower and slightly more consultative process to test all of the key elements in that strategy to see if they still hold up in the light of the prospect of Brexit. We concluded that the focus on partnership was absolutely right and needed to continue. We needed to look to work with local partners around the world, and that the 5 strategic drivers in the strategy were also right. But we thought there were 2 things that we needed to adjust in the light of Brexit. One was that an even greater focus on student recruitment in order to maintain the diversity of our student body. So we've profiled or foregrounded that slightly in how we're presenting the strategy now. And the second is that in terms of raising our profile internationally, we kind of been able to take a lot for granted as member of the EU. We're now going to have to draw more, I think, on the advantages of our position in London, being in of and for London, to project ourselves internationally. We also looked at the geographical areas of focus, and as Michael said earlier, we are very definitely not leading Europe, and we're trying to signal that really clearly by upping our profile and our collaborations, particularly but not exclusively in France and Germany and Italy. And before I hand over to the next panel member, I would just, because I'm SMT's gender champion, I'd like you all to admire the gender balance of this particular panel.
I can't imagine how that came about.
Thank you, Nicola. Fiona.
Yeah, so let me introduce myself. I'm Fiona Ryland, and as Michael said, this is day 8 for me. So I'm really pleased to be here. I've had a great first 8 days, so I think I'm going to love it. Clearly, my priority is to support our people through the current processes that we have at the moment and make that as easy as possible for people. And also, from whatever comes out of the Brexit negotiations and what that means, then helping our people through that as well. So I am keen to get your feedback around what support would be helpful.
Laurie Houlihan, Vice-Provost Development. Reflecting on last year, just after Brexit, of course, we launched a £600 million fundraising campaign. And a lot of people have asked, what's the impact of Brexit on that and on philanthropy? I think the first answer is that nobody likes uncertainty, and I think that has had a bit of an impact initially. I think lots of universities have felt that. But the good news is that philanthropy in the UK is growing year on year. And actually yesterday it was announced that there's been a 22% increase in philanthropy to British universities in years 15-16, and hit the 1 billion mark. And UCL is currently 4th in the UK in terms of fundraising performance. So I think we've still got a long way to go with our fundraising, and we've still got a lot of asking to do and cultivation to do. But wherever we are doing that asking and cultivation and relationship building, Brexit is coming up in the discussions, particularly overseas. People, our alumni, when we're visiting countries overseas, are really interested to know what's happening, but also really pleased with the level of communication that we've had right from the get-go, with lots of positive feedback about how they felt they've kept informed. But I think what it does make us reflect on as an institution and communicating with alumni and supporters, and beyond that as well, is how do we demonstrate the impact of what we do as universities. And we've got an opportunity with Brexit to particularly highlight the expertise of this institution in the Brexit space. We've got opportunity to talk about our alignment with the new industry strategy. But I think generally, I think we have to recognise that lots of people don't really understand or really get what universities do and the impact that we have. And I think that came through last year. So I think there's a lesson for us there. I think also other things that have come out that I hadn't thought about was when we're talking to alumni, particularly overseas, is that coming to the UK to study was also a kind of access into Europe. So part of the kind of coming here was the ability to go and experience Europe and travel in Europe. So alumni have been asking us, well, what will that mean for future students? Will it be as easy to go to Italy for the weekend or Amsterdam or wherever? So I think keeping the communication with all our stakeholders is really important through all this, but really sending strong message externally about the impact of universities is going to be important as well.
Thank you. So we've just had an overview in terms of what UCL is doing, what the leadership are thinking about Europe, how we can be part of those negotiations. Now I'd like to open up the floor to you, and I believe we have a roving microphone at the, yes. If you would like to ask your questions, say who you are and where in UCL you come from, and then we'll hand them on to the panel. So there's a question over there, the lady in blue.
Hi, my name is Ricky. I work for the Faculty of Population Health Sciences. I don't currently have a British passport. I have been in this country for 20 years. I'm hoping, we're not sure what's going to happen. My question is, if it comes to a point where we as EU citizens will need to have a British passport in order to continue to work on equal footing, is there any way that UCL can support us financially? It's quite expensive to get a British passport.
Okay. It doesn't surprise me that this question has come up. And I think, let me just say a few things about this, and then we'll get some other input from others. I don't think we're yet at the stage where we would want to, as an institution, make a recommendation to you about what you should do, because there's still too much up in the air. So, for example, I could say to you, well, yes, you should try and become a British citizen now and get yourself a British passport and go through all that process and pay all of that money, and then in 4 weeks' time or 8 weeks' time or 4 months' time, I have no idea, the government cooks a deal, and then there are 3 million EU citizens here in the UK that have to be taken care of. And my guess is that they'll make the bureaucracy very light because there are so many people involved. So there might, I don't know what the process might be, but it might be as simple as a letter from your employer that you're employed and been here for 20 years or whatever. It might be slightly more complicated than that. So something may happen down the track that will make all of that bureaucracy that goes with applying for a British citizenship and all of that expense unnecessary. But I think it is a key question that I quite like answered by you as a group today. I can imagine with the notion that this is now going to take at least another 2 years, possibly, with all this, nothing is agreed till everything is agreed mantra. And 2 years is a long time to be uncertain. And I can imagine that if I was in your position, I might think, you know what, I think I'm just going to get my passport application done because I need the certainty. So what I'd like to know is how many of you are feeling like that. And then to answer your question directly, we are aware that some other universities have gone over to supporting people for their citizenship applications, which I can't remember the exact cost, but it's over £1,000, isn't it? And they've done so by making available interest-free loans. And I think we've discussed this a few times and always felt it's too soon, but we are prepared to consider it in some detail. We need to have a look at what other universities have done. We'll need to look at taxation issues and other legal aspects. We need to set it up in a way that protects UCL. So, for example, if we do loan you the money, I'm afraid you do have to pay us back, and that includes even if you leave UCL. So we've got to set it up in a way that is appropriate. But we are prepared to do it if there's strong demand and if that is the way that things are going generally. We haven't formally made that decision. I'll have to take it through a process, but that's our gut feeling as we sit here at the moment. And so let me just ask a general question. How many of you are going to apply for British citizenship no matter what? So really quite a significant number. And how many of you would like access to a loan to make that happen? Okay, so quite a number. I mean, I did a quick calculation. 20% of our staff, that's 4,000 people, 5,000 people, £1,000 a pop is 5 million that we've got to find. I'm not quite sure how we do that in accounting terms in a way that works for our overall bank balance. But because it's a loan, I think we can probably do it. I just want you to get a feel for the scale of what we have to consider. I have to assume that everyone who might be eligible might apply. I suspect that won't happen. And how many of you are EU citizens who are just going to sit it out? There is, yeah, but do you want to, I'll ask Nicola, there are other options like permanent residency.
Because I've heard some staff talk about applying for permanent residency. There were media reports of the government trying to discourage people from applying that recently, and I was just wondering how you felt about that.
Permanent,
as an alternative to applying for citizenship.
so you can apply for permanent residency. Seems like I've got the only microphone that's working, so I don't know if you can turn the other microphones up. So you can apply for permanent residency instead of EU citizenship. And obviously that allows you the right to remain and to work here, but it doesn't give you quite the same rights as being a full British citizen.
Okay, right. There's another question up there, lady with glasses.
Just a point of clarification on the permanent residency. It's been changed a week or two ago, I think. It now displays on the website that we are discouraged to do it because it's not necessary, because we have the same right until the day of Brexit. The formula that needs to be filled in has been simplified between, I think, January and February, and so it's only 40 pages instead of 60. And you don't have to list every single time you've left and entered the UK, which was the big hurdle. So you can still do it, but officially the guidance indeed says it technically doesn't have a purpose. I think one of the issue which is related to the question about the loan support to apply for funding, one of the possibility that I've read in the press is that if EU citizens are indeed automatically given permanent residency without having to apply for the citizenship, there's still the issue of which kind of visa they'll be given to stay and whether UCL as an employer would have to pay for their visa fees to employ them, just like other non-EU citizens currently have under certain tiers of the visa. So there's still an issue of payment that could arise in the future if this permanent residency was made subject to a visa payment by the employer, which is something to take into account in your discussion about the financial implications of this. Can I ask a different question on a different topic?
Yes, please.
My question was more generally about what the Brexit mitigation group is doing, and I was just, I'm sorry, I should have introduced myself. I'm from the Bartlett School of Planning, and I'm in charge of international relations for that school. One of the things we've been discussing internally is whether all the risks that Brexit is posing in terms of student numbers, in terms of staff retention, access to research income, the possibility of interest rates on an EIB loan increasing, have been also factored in terms of financial risk for the long-term growth strategy that UCL is having in terms of UCL East and other expansion plan. So generally this creates a lot of uncertainty which could jeopardize some of the big things that have been decided. And I think there's a general feeling that, you know, that may have implications on staff and things like that. So I don't know whether, I'm sure you've been thinking about this, but I was wondering if you could tell us more about whether scenarios are being prepared and how risk is managed effectively.
Thank you. Should we come to Michael and then to Nicola?
I'm happy to take that question. First, let me say the EIB loan was signed, sealed and delivered and in pounds sterling before the referendum vote. So we got that one absolutely right. So there is no risk. We have, of course, considered our expansion plans against the risks and had quite a lengthy discussion about that at the Council Away Day just earlier this week. And I think the short answer is that we're confident that we can manage and mitigate the risks that we're facing. The current thinking about student numbers and income from student numbers is positive. We are bucking the trend. The country is 7% down on EU applications. We're 0.8% up. We've also found something quite interesting, which is that if you look at the EU students that come to us at the moment and you look at how many take the loan, then the average is 48% of them take the loan. But if you look country by country, our 5 biggest markets are France, Germany, Italy, Spain and Greece. Only 30% of the students coming from those countries take the loan. The rest just pay the fee. So I think our view is that if we market harder, and we have been marketing harder, by the way, in those European countries already, that was one of the mitigation actions, then we should be able to continue bucking the trend. And of course, in a future where we have exited the European Union, then we would probably be looking, in fact almost certainly be looking to charge an international fee to those European Union students. So even though our student number may drop, our income probably won't drop that much. That's a risk that we're going to take, but we think it's quite a measured risk and based a little bit on market information. So that's a sort of preliminary answer to the questions that you've come across. So at no point in our thinking as an executive team or our governing body has anyone really wanted to back off from our excellent academic plans. And you'll be hearing more about those as they get finalised over the next few weeks and months, and I was intending really to do quite a lot of comms about coming out of our planning round and what's going to be happening at this university over the next few years, because I think we all know what's happening in the short term. We all know about UCL 2034, but what does it look like in that 5 to 10 year time frame? We've been doing quite a lot of work on that in recent weeks, and we would like to share that with you as and when we've formalised it and done a little bit more detailed work.
Thank you, Michael. Nicola.
To add a bit more detail about how the Brexit Mitigation Group works, and keeping a close eye on Conor Wickford, who's sitting over there from my office, who acts as secretary of the group. Initially, we met weekly in Michael's office, which was a signal of the amount of time and the importance we thought this deserved. Then we deliberately decided to move it to fortnightly, and now we meet roughly once a month. We have looked not only at the impact of potential recruitment projections on UCL generally, but we've looked at it in terms of individual parts of UCL and even down to individual programs. And we are seeing something of a differential impact. So there are some programs in CELTS or in CEAS, but it may be, and I stress maybe, and I'm looking at Collette, who's the expert here, this may be the Brexit factor impacting on a trend that was already apparent in declining numbers studying modern foreign languages, for example. But what I want to reassure you is we are looking at that level of granularity in terms of programme, and one of Colette's teams is really on top of that. And on your point about managing risk more generally, the process for managing risk is the classic one. We have a Brexit risk register, which is really quite detailed, which the Brexit Mitigation group reviews. And the owner, the overall owner of that risk register, you'll be reassured to know, is our finance director.
Okay, thank you. Laurie.
I think one of the things that the Brexit Mitigation Group has done is that we've taken a really forensic look at our relationship with Europe. We probably know more about what we're doing as an institution with Europe than we did before. And as a result of that, we're able to kind of have a lot more data and information coming to us. And the signs from the academic activity are really encouraging about the number of applications that are being made, the number of partnerships that are being developed. In fact, if anything, we can see an increase in activity. We're also involved in organisations like LIRU and very much taking a leadership role in research in Europe as well.
Okay, thank you. So just stepping out momentarily from my job as chairing this, my department do look after student recruitment. And as mentioned, we've been looking at faculty and country level to really just see where we might be at risk. So we're very much aware of what you're saying, and hopefully it won't impact us too much. I'd like to move on to the gentleman down here in the grey jumper who's been patiently waiting. If you could just remember to tell us who you are and where you're from.
Hi, my name's Ben Webb, in Institute of Epidemiology and Healthcare, formerly HR. I understand the amount of support that we've been providing for staff, and my question is specifically on PhD students. We've had a lot, especially in our institute, a lot of kind of pressure and a lot of questions about what support PhD students are provided in light of Brexit, and is there any scope for the kind of support staff have been getting to be given to PhD students?
Okay.
And can you be a little bit more specific? What sort of things are they concerned about?
Things like the staff queries, mailbox that they've got, the clinics, and various things like that.
I mean, the short answer to that would be yes. I thought that we already were providing that across the piece. There are certainly the question that was asked last time about Research Council awards to Europeans. The government have made it clear that they will all continue right through the Brexit period until the PhD is completed. So that seemed to be the primary concern last time for PhD students. Would their funding continue throughout their PhD studentship, particularly if it was British government funding? And the government did answer that very quickly and said yes. Providing clinics and so on, I think we probably need to find a simpler way of doing that because of the volume. So I would point people to the FAQ website in the first instance and see if we can handle most of their queries through that sort of route. And maybe, I don't know if we can set up a Q&A system off the back of that website so that if there's still ongoing questions we can try and help. I think I prefer to do it that way.
Yeah. Hi, just to add to that, I'm Wendy Appleby, Registrar and Head of Student and Registry Services, and I can see over in the corner, so wave if you want to add more folks, some colleagues from Student Support and Wellbeing, but we do have support sessions for students more generally, and what we've found is that actually we haven't had a lot of students come into us with particular concerns around Brexit and the implications of Brexit for them. But if there are students who do have concerns, then if we go to Student Support and Wellbeing in the first instance, then we can look at how we support them. With PhD students as well, sometimes with some of the support we have available, we can tap into the HR resources, but of course it does vary from individual to individual.
Thank you, Wendy. Fiona, would you like to add anything? Sorry.
I just wanted to make the point that we'll make sure it's clear that they can access the same information and the support systems.
Okay, thank you. There's a question in the middle in an impossible place for you to get the mic, but here.
I'll just project.
Go on then.
Okay. My name is Alice Tilo. I just joined the History Art Department this fall, and I got my position in May, right before the referendum. My right to work here is tied to my husband, who's a German citizen, and UCL has declined to support the
Okay, thank you.
I suspect we would have no way of counting you because we wouldn't necessarily know about your affiliation. So my 20% is people who are full-on EU citizens. Now, having heard your story, I don't see any reason why we couldn't offer the same level of support and advice that we offer to your partner for you, and to do the same for other EU citizens. And I'm not quite sure what I'm talking about here, but the sort of thing I was thinking about was particularly the clinics that we've been running to offer individual advice from an immigration lawyer is probably the most important thing that we've been doing to support people. And if you would like to gain access to that, either separate from or with your partner, we could probably arrange that. I'm committing HR to some more expenditure, but I guess we knew that was going to happen today. How many of you have found those legal clinics, or how many of you still would like access to that legal advice that you haven't been able to get? So still a few. So I think, Fiona, that probably setting up some more of those clinics is probably a valuable thing. And I do think we should not, we should be sensitive to the issue that you've raised.
Thank you.
We do have a recording of the immigration clinics online. There was a series of them held towards the end of last year. There was 10 clinics which we held. They've been recorded, and information which have come out are FAQs, and they're available for anyone to access. So the clinics, at this stage, because we have no more information, we'll be repeating information about applications and status and as we know it, and that's available now, which is accessible to everybody.
Okay, thank you.
And just to make a more general point, when we think about our response to Brexit and saying that we need to redouble our international engagement, we really do mean globally. So when we're thinking about our staff or students who are EU citizens, we're also thinking about our staff or students who are from other countries as well, because we need to continue to signal that UCL is a really globally engaged university, which means that we really welcome and value contribution from all our international staff, European and wider. So we are thinking in the Global Engagement Office about people who happen not to be British, but who are making a contribution to UCL, who come from the EU or further afield.
Thank you. There's a lady down here who's been waiting to ask a question. I think the mic's almost there, so tell us who you are and where in UCL you're from.
I am Paolo Oliveri. I'm in Genetic Evolution and Environment Department. I am a foreigner, and continue on the clinics. I've been in one of these clinics. In general, they are useful, but in the reality, each of our stories is personal. And I've been traveling the world for the job that I've done. I had the pleasure. And I've been also in the United States, where generally big global universities have a dedicated office that advise specific people. I'm wondering if UCL can think about that, to have a specific lawyer that can kind of like adjust to the needs of every one of us and give advice that are more particular rather than general.
Okay, Michael? Oh, no.
I need to understand a little bit more about what you mean and what you're looking for that you can't get from the setup that we've got. Unfortunately, we're not as well endowed as some of our American counterparts, and we have to contain costs for the services that we provide. So it would come back to whether or not there's a real wide need for that sort of thing for us to be in a position to invest more permanently. We are obviously spending money on this issue currently, but we're drafting it in according to need rather than setting up a permanent office. But we would look to HR to provide most of that support for our international members of staff. So I'm going to turn to the HR team and ask them to tell me what we do provide and how we can provide some reassurance on that question.
I mean, the position at the moment is we would give you access to those clinics and to the FAQs. The thing we probably would not do as UCL is to give you individual legal advice on immigration matters. I think the question would be whether we might appoint an external independent legal advisor on that, but I don't think UCL would go down that line.
Okay, thank you, Jeff. There's a gentleman back on the right here, and then we'll go over to the lady on the other side.
Hi, Adam Cresswell from the REF team. I think it's encouraging to hear that UCL set up some Brexit policy groups to offer some kind of educated and research-driven steer to this thing. But what are the indications that the government has any interest in listening? Michael Gove may be gone, but I'm not feeling an awful lot of love for experts yet.
Good question.
Two examples of evidence of interest, maybe 2.5. With the Education Select Committee choosing to come to UCL to take evidence, personally from Michael, but wanting to be cited here. We had unsolicited request for a visit by a minister from the Department for Exiting the EU, who had links with UCL. He came a couple of months ago. We have quite a lot of contact with officials in Whitehall. They've come to events here at UCL. We have been to see the UK permanent representative in Brussels, so we have a reasonable amount of access. I think that the offers that we've made, Michael has written to a number of ministers, that is linked to some of these activities that I mentioned. We haven't exactly been invited in with open arms, largely because I think the government and the bureaucracy has been involved in trying to set up really new mechanisms. But I think that we are as well organised and as well placed. We've had private indications as well from some government ministers that UCL's contribution in positioning ourselves to trying to make the best for Britain of either Brexit or a bad job, whatever you might like to call it, we've positioned ourselves reasonably well.
And just to add to that, Professor Graham Reid has been asked to be part of the BIS group on Brexit. So that's quite a small group, obviously involves the Minister, Joe Johnson, Graham Reid, and it also involves the heads of the mission groups, the Russell Group, UUK, Million Plus, etc. I'm not quite sure what goes on in those meetings yet, but having Graham on the inside obviously is a good thing, and we are trying to influence things positively in the ways that I described earlier.
Thank you.
That would be great fun, wouldn't it? And I think the government is finding it tough. They've got to put together this negotiation team. They're in quite a difficult place. They are recognising that they need help, and they are, I think, listening to those expert groups, despite Mr. Gove's intervention in the Brexit debate. We've had enough of experts, haven't we, or whatever he said. One of the most appalling things I've heard a politician say, beaten only by the Prime Minister, who said, if you're a citizen of the globe, you're a citizen of nowhere. I thought, what a dreadful, dreadful, awful thing for a Prime Minister to say. And I know this is being recorded, and I hope she's watching.
So, unless anyone else wants to cover that, there's a question. The lady there. Thank you.
Thank you. This feels rather mundane after that statement. Jolene Scordis, Director of the Centre for Global Health Economics. I am one of those European citizens who is hoping that a abbreviated method of applying for dual citizenship will need to be developed. Given it seems you are hoping so too, given the likely cost to universities of supporting staff if that doesn't happen in the region of 5 million, Is this a negotiating point within your talks? Are you pushing for a short form for EU staff that can be supported by the universities at low cost both in time and paper terms, and low cost both in financial terms? It seems a early harvest, potentially. Thank you.
We've been stressing the need for a light touch process to support right for permanent residency in the UK. We haven't been prescriptive about what that should be, but just emphasising it needs to be as light touch as possible, so not 80 pages.
And I would anticipate that if this happens, or hopefully when it happens, they'll come up with a date. Might be the referendum date, might be the Article 50 date, but it will be some sort of retrospective date, I would imagine, and we would obviously push for as light touch a process as possible, so that everybody who was here on that day has full rights. That's what we're looking for.
Great. Question over here.
Hello, thanks. So this is Nicola from the Department of Chemical Engineering, but this is not really related to where I'm from, just the fact that I am a British citizen and I know other EU citizens, and I wonder, all this talk about the people who are already here and are EU citizens, and at the point of the referendum I was here and therefore I want access or would like access to continue being here. But what about after we've left Europe? How are we still going to attract people from the EU to come here as a staff, and are they going to get support? And that might be out of our control because that's what part of the negotiations is going to be about. But are we doing, or are you doing anything in these various supporting groups to promote, if the opinion is that we still want those people to be coming here, how can we make it easy for them?
Sorry.
I'll have first crack at that and ask the rest of the panel to join in. It is a crucial issue, and I think we have to work on the principle that our government wants the best for our country, and if we're going to be more standalone and outside of the EU, then we've got to have a very clear plan of how we're going to be successful as a country. And you've seen the beginnings of that in what's been published as the industrial strategy. And you've also seen the Chancellor of the Exchequer put an extra £1 billion plus into the research economy of the country. So the idea is that we will be a high-tech, knowledge-driven economy, and therefore we're going to need really good people to come and be part of that. So what we should push for is either a very specific deal for EU citizens, or a deal that's global, but that eases and makes easier the recruitment of great talent into universities like ours from around the globe, with a much more simplified immigration system. I think either of those options would work for us. I think the EU thing we might be able to persuade our government that EU citizens coming to universities to participate in research and education is a good thing for the country, and that level of mobility might be enough for us to secure a deal over continued access to EU research funding. So I'm looking for that sort of sector-specific deal as one option, but if that falls through because of the mobility thing, then a much more easier system for recruitment of all academic staff and other staff, actually, all university staff to this country, so that we've got the talent pool that we need to run the sort of strategy that the country is thinking of. So that's the sort of lines. Those are the sort of lines that we're taking. There is going to be a new immigration bill through there was going to be a new immigration bill through Parliament under the previous government. I assume that if the Conservatives are re-elected, that they will push through that new immigration bill in the new Parliament.
Laurie.
Just a slightly different angle to that answer is the the London factor, I mean, we have a distinct advantage, obviously, of being in London for lots of reasons, and it hasn't come up so far in our discussion, but we have been also working with the Mayor's Office, and Michael has been working with other London leaders of higher education institutions and making representations to make sure that London remains attractive and a centre of activity and still attractive beyond Brexit to a whole range of people from Europe and beyond.
In addition to that, I think we can take a bit of comfort from the fact that the government has published, I think they call them 10 negotiating principles for the Brexit negotiations, and one of them highlights retaining the UK's position as, I can't remember the exact words, but world leading in science and research, and I think, and in innovation. And I think we take science in its broadest possible sense, and I think that's something that we can refer back to. Science and the creation of knowledge more generally is fundamentally international, and so to retain that world leading position, we've got to retain an ability to attract global talent.
Thank you. There's another question up here, gentleman to the beard.
Hi, Michael Wozniak sees. Since we're on the jobs, I was just wondering whether we're expecting to reduce any staff numbers as a result of dropping student numbers, even if our finances are going to be fine.
No. If you look at the plans that are coming forward, we've got the opposite problem. We've got a lot of new staff requested in the planning processes, and we're finding it difficult to contain that enthusiasm to a financially affordable level. But at no point in any of this have we as yet considered reduction in staff numbers. Now, I will be honest with you. If the bottom of the world falls out, okay, and we take a huge hit in income, then we will have to manage that situation, and that could, in theory, as a matter of very last resort, include some reduction in staff numbers. But I think it would have to be pretty serious here. Everything about what we're doing at the moment is going in the opposite direction. Our research income is increasing. Our student numbers are increasing. Our other income is increasing. Our staff numbers are increasing. So I have the pleasure of doing the introduction and welcome to UCL. And I do that every 3 months, and I walk into a room with about 150 people in. So we're still recruiting, and recruiting quite actively. And much of that, of course, is driven by our success, both in terms of research income. Research income in this university has increased by 258% in 10 years. It's absolutely remarkable, that level of success. Congratulations to all of you. You're all part of that. So I don't think you need to worry about reduction in staff numbers.
Great, thank you. Any other questions? Yes, the lady down here.
Thank you. I'm Alison writing History of Art. One thing I want to say is just an observation, really, which is to bring it back to the immediate moment that we're in, which is a situation in which, of course, students, but particularly staff, are feeling still quite angry about the government's reaction. The fact that there was the possibility to make a unilateral deal to make people feel safe working in this country, and they chose not to. And I feel that one of the things that, as an institution, I'm really pleased to see how positively, across the board, it's engaging with all the sorts of ways in which one can influence the current situation, and that's very good. One of the most specific things that I think hasn't always been as strongly emphasised is how, when staff come, particularly perhaps to HR, really worried, very anxious about what's going to happen to them, that they've sometimes got very short replies of the lines of, no, we can't give you a certificate of sponsorship, for example. And while it might be perfectly understandable why that's not the case, that that can't happen. I think one of the things I would really want to see is explanations for that, the time taken to explain why at the moment this isn't UCL's policy, and why we understand how you're feeling, this is where you should go. Obviously that's also the job of heads of department like myself, but I think that HR has not been uniformly sensitive to this issue, and I think that would make an enormous amount of difference to the morale of teaching staff and academic staff in general.
Look, I completely take on board that feedback, and I'm sorry that has been the approach, but what I'll do is I'll go back to my team and we'll do a communication and training exercise with our people. So I'm sorry that's been your experience, but that wouldn't be.
It's understandable, but it's very good to hear you say that.
Yeah, I
because
agree.
I think it's managing how people are dealing in the moment, and of course everybody's situation is different, but that collective sense that whatever else will happen, UCL will support you is so important, I think. So thank you very much.
It's just a bit of empathy, isn't it? Even if the answer isn't the answer you're hoping for.
And let me add that I think we have historically under-resourced our HR department. Lots of people are going to be surprised by that statement, but I can tell you that the HR department has not changed in size through the last significant period of expansion of staff and student numbers. And that was done as a deliberate efficiency, and I think it was overdone and probably continued to be overdone for the early part of my time here, but I think we have recognised it. I'm delighted that we've recruited Fiona, and it is a fresh start, I think, for us, and that's wonderful feedback on day 8. So you can rev the troops up in a different way.
Great. We're still billed for another 15 minutes, but if there are any other questions, yes, there's a question in the middle, and we are getting a microphone over to you.
Hi, I'm Katie Grocott from Student Recruitment Marketing. When you've been talking about kind of attracting, the staff and the students once Brexit's been completed, I've noticed that a lot of the focus has been on science, so research. What about, we're a multi-faculty university, what about the other side of the arts, the social sciences, education, medicine, everything else that we do that isn't just science? I wondered if any particular thought, if a different approach would need to be taken to that, or if any particular thought had been given to it.
Well, I'm sorry if we've given that impression. It's not intentional. When I talk about research funding, I'm talking about all of those things. In fact, the ERC is a great source of funding for research in the arts and humanities and social sciences, and we would sorely miss it. So we have been asked by the Arts and Humanities Research Council to take a particular emphasis on this issue in all of these discussions. So yes, no, our thoughts are literally pan-university, and obviously our staff are distributed, our European staff and our European students are distributed across pretty much every faculty. So there's no intention to be science specific, and if it's come across that way, then it's an error on our part.
Okay, are there any more questions at this point? Oh, there is a question at the back there, gentlemen.
Antonio Guarino, Economics. You mentioned at the beginning an interest in developing collaborations, in particular in Germany, France, Italy. Would you be able to be a bit more specific? Are you thinking of opening a campus, for instance, or what else? Can you say something more specific?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the beginning of that. I heard you talking about saying more specific about campus.
You mentioned at the beginning an interest in developing collaboration with Germany, France, Italy in particular. I was wondering, what exactly are you thinking of doing? Thank you.
We looked and consulted with the communities at UCL, very thoroughly before we developed the global engagement strategy about what they felt about overseas campuses. And there was a very, very strong consensus that we ought to be looking for local partners rather than having bricks and mortar. So we wanted, this is all under the umbrella of UCL 2034, the sixth principal theme, how do we have more global impact? And the strong conclusion was that you get global impact through working with local partners, not through bricks and mortar. We did review that, we looked at it again, and I would say we're probably still keeping it under review in the light of Brexit. What advantage potentially might there be? And there have been various media reports. Most of them, I would say, have proved to point to a bit of a dead end about whether other universities will be setting up entities or institutes in the EU. All of our current thinking is that there wouldn't be much benefit post-Brexit in having set up any kind of physical entity for a host of reasons, including the most obvious one is that it would be quite difficult to repatriate any funding generated within the EU back to the UK. So what we're still doing at the moment is exploring, probably accelerating the collaborations we have with existing key partners in 2 or 3 or 4 European countries, keeping our ears and eyes open for whether there is a different kind of avenue that will be beneficial, but all of the early thinking, and it's something that I mentioned Connor Wickford before. Connor and I probably talk about on a weekly basis. Has anything changed that might make us want to look afresh at this? But up till now, we still think that the advantage lies with working with local partners rather than with a campus bricks and mortar approach.
Any final questions from anyone? Yes?
Well, I'm holding a microphone, so this will be easy. I'm Emma, I'm in the events team. I remember at the last event there was a possibly slight glib remark about having a party. But I was just thinking, we're talking a lot about sort of the bricks and mortar and the paperwork and the rules and all that sort of stuff. And to someone's point about making people just feel welcome, not just giving the information, but also how people are feeling. I imagine that we have a number of like international student groups. What Laurie was saying about people thinking about the reason they came here is because they could go to Italy for the weekend, you know. I was just wondering, along with all the excellent sort of like hard-nosed work that's going on, what are we also thinking about? I'm thinking maybe for like open days or when students first arrive or at Michael's welcome sessions, what are we doing to kind of really communicate that we're London's global university in a sort of more, I don't want to say infographic-y kind of way, but you know what I mean, sort of a bit more celebratory, that we're still here and we're supporting people.
Well, this is a perfect plug for the festival that we're going to have on the 10th of June.
I'll take my money later, thanks, Laurie.
So on the 10th of June, we're having, it's called It's All Academic Festival. And the thinking behind that was really to, as part of the campaign, which is also about raising money, but it's also about engagement with our supporters and our community. And that's on our website, it's on the homepage. And it's an opportunity for people to bring their families to UCL, staff, alumni, friends. And it's going to be a fantastic day with different activities representing across UCL. I think the infographics, the communications, I think making this, can't over-communicate, I think, is the message. I think UUK have done a good job on informatics and showing the impact of our European and international communities and on the rest of the UK. So I think, CAM are doing a great job in working on this, but at every single message, at every opportunity, we talk about this, and we will continue to do that. But please come to the festival.
And can I also celebrate what Registry and some of Wendy's teams are doing? So Lena is sitting at the back there, helps organise the International Students Orientation programme, which is so popular. I think you have to run 3 a year, Lena, and some of our UK students have been saying, what about us? We've heard great things about how you're welcoming international students. So I think Registry, their teams are doing a really good job.
That's exactly what I was going to say. It's very much about the focus on welcoming particularly international students, but all students. And in addition to the ISOP and our dedicated international student support team, we have a new school for our new students, which actually starts up around June time. And that really does celebrate the diversity of UCL. last year in the newsfeed we had a video featuring Michael. We had other videos on all range of topics and to help students kind of think about what their experience would be like, what to expect in London, what UCL would be like. But we did have a welcome video from Michael that particularly touched on Brexit and had a particular word as well for our European students or non-UK European students.
Good. So hopefully that answers the question, and just to really wrap up and say it is incredibly important as London's global university that we continue to be welcoming, and I know from the international recruitment team when they're out talking to students overseas, London still comes across as a global capital, still a destination. I think we're living in very challenging times, and with the events in America, London has come back as being a really desirable place to go and study because it is cosmopolitan, and really just building on what my colleagues have said, that we want to make sure that international students from wherever they are feel completely welcome. Now we have a few minutes left. I don't want to drag it out unless there are burning questions, but equally I don't want to cut us short if there are other things that people do want to say. Oh yes, please.
In terms of people who are looking for dual nationality, the other way, because there are many of us who are half and half, who have British passports, but we're looking into getting our passports for France, Italy, Spain, Germany, wherever. Is this government at all interested or concerned about the brain drain that will affect this university and every other university in the UK?
So my wife is applying for an Irish passport.
Get one as well.
She is Irish, so that helps. And of course my kids can apply, and I can't. So I'm feeling very downtrodden by this. But to be slightly serious about your point, yes, I think the government is concerned about the prospect of a brain drain, and it wanted to cook a deal about citizenship early. It's met with resistance from the EU negotiators, and there are rumours about the political origins of that, but just be careful on counting who you think your friends are, I think, in Europe, and I don't think we've got very many left. So it was the EU that blocked the early deal, maybe because they want the brain drain and they want you all to go to other places. I've certainly had, I've had one spectacularly enthusiastic and amazing visit from the Polish Academy of Sciences, who came into my office and directly asked me if I wouldn't mind helping to get everyone from Poland back to Poland so that they could have all those brains in their Polish Academy of Sciences. And I said, well, guess what, it doesn't quite work like that. So it is an issue, and the government is concerned about it. And I do think the government will try to sort this set of issues out such that there isn't an imperative to move away. And then what I would say, and we're obviously keeping as close an eye on this as we can, we are not seeing, at this point anyway, an exodus from UCL, and we are seeing satisfactory recruitment of some very high-profile European leaders into various activities that we are undertaking. So far, so good. It's a real risk, and it's exactly the language that we're using with government when we talk to them. We're very worried about this, and that you've got to do the right thing to stop it from happening. And the reason you've got to do the right thing is not because it's good for UCL, but because it's good for the country and the country's future prosperity. And I truly believe that. And I think our government does too, so I think they will sort it out. I have to be an optimist. But that's what I think.
Great, thank you. Well, I actually feel on that optimistic note, we probably should draw this Q&A to a close. It's been a fantastic discussion. It's been really helpful, I know, for the senior team here to hear your views on what the concerns are, ranging from what it means for UCL as an organisation to how we're influencing government through policy discussions and so on. And I know that the HR team, led by Fiona, Jeff and others, will be communicating back to you about the very practical considerations for those of you who are going to be directly affected. So there is the link on the screen which will follow up in communications with you, both to the information hub, recordings from today, and also links to the policy Brexit hub as well, for those of you who want to look at what we're doing there. So that's it. I would just like to thank you very much for attending.